Okay, this is an interview with Marius Harold, longtime Subud member, helper, and all around good guy. So, Marius, can you start out by telling us when and how you came into Subud?
Yeah. When Hilda and I, my wife, Hilda, and I were in Alaska, we started to, actually it began when I was headed to Alaska to meet up with Hilda. I read a book on the 6 major religions of the world. And at that time in my life, I was searching for understanding, and I suppose I started that search when I was 10 years old. I mean, I'd been searching for a long time. And I came from a kind of dysfunctional family, so I was trying to figure out what it all meant. So when I got to Alaska, Hilda had begun to read Ouspensky and Gurdjieff and some different spiritual guides in the world. And I wanted to understand, which has been my quest for my whole life, I think. So I got into Gurdjieff and discovered from his work that there was maybe a way we could be more conscious. And so we began to try his techniques and, you know, as well as we could out of books, follow the instructions from Ouspensky and Gurdjieff. And we read just about everything that was written by those guys. And of course, it helped to be on a quest, but it really didn't change our behavior very much, even though we were trying real hard. But I was also enthralled with the world and with alcohol and relationship and just trying to figure things out as a young man. I was about 25 years old, maybe. And at one point in my life, I woke up in the same position as I had many, many Sunday mornings, having drunk too much and manifested some kind of unacceptable behavior. And I was really discouraged with having followed this pattern for so long and woken up on many Sunday mornings in the same state, that I wrote myself this letter that was like 4 or 5 pages long, reminding myself, because I would always forget exactly the state I was in and how remorseful I felt about my behavior. And I forced myself to read that letter for 40 days, every morning when I woke up. And shortly after that, Hilda was at the Juneau Library, because she's a researcher and a bookworm, probably the most active one I've ever known in my life. And she came home with a book by Bennett called Concerning Subud. And we read the book and decided if we couldn't get to England to get to a 4th way school with the Gurdjieff system, we should explore Subud, because it sounded from Bennett like this was a real answer to actually changing our life. So we contacted people in Seattle, and they told us there had been a group in Portland, where is my hometown, since 1959. The Masons started that group. And so we called somebody in Portland, and they said, yeah, come down, and next time you're in Portland, then check it out. So we did, and Hilda got open right away, and I went to meet helpers, and then I got open shortly after that and had a really powerful experience in my first opening. In fact, it changed my my vision and my hearing, and was really pretty profound. I received this kind of jolt through the back of my head, and I thought somebody had hit me in the back of the head with a 2x4. So I looked around, during the Latihan, and there was nobody there, of course. And it scared me pretty bad because I knew there was really something up. And if it was like coming from a dark place, I was in big trouble. So I said, every time I could think of it during the day and for the next several weeks, I said the Our Father. But during that period, at the beginning of my Subud experience, I wasn't moving very much in Latihan, but I was getting all this flood of information about what I got from my father, what I got from my mother, and began to understand that there'd been a lot of kind of a false story taught to me by my parents to kind of placate the chaos in our family. And for a while, I was pretty mad at my mother because she'd made up this story about my father. Anyway, it was just one of those things where all this revelation was coming to me. But when I go to Latihan, I hardly moved at all. And Hilda would come out of Latihan and say, wow, that was really a good Latihan. And I'd say, yeah, I guess so. Because I wanted to be receiving, as I heard it was possible to receive. So since my very first opening, it was quite a long time before I actually moved in my Latihan very much. In fact, when I stopped Latihan, I could see my footprints in the carpet. I really hadn't moved at all. My arms would float up a little bit. But at the same time, all this understanding was coming to me and just flooding into me. So I knew something was up, but I was kind of discouraged because I wasn't moving like all the other men in the Latihan. And then we went to Vancouver, BC. It was probably about the third or fourth Bapak talk that when he'd travel around, we'd saw him in Seattle and different places. But in Vancouver, BC, something happened that was kind of interesting. Just before we went to Latihan, we left our daughter, Lucia, with a babysitter. And just before we walked out the door, she fell down the stairs. And she had a big knot on her head. And I thought, man, I can't go to Latihan. And then about 2 seconds later, she was laughing and playing with this other little kid. She still had a knot on her head, but she was fine. And there was a feeling yet, yes, she's fine. And so we did go to Latihan. And in that Latihan, I stood and my hands floated up a little bit. And, I was ready to surrender, but couldn't seem to break through. And so I was standing there, and pretty soon I heard somebody standing right in front of me, and somebody lifted up my arms and said, yeah, move. And he lifted my arms up and down. And I was shocked because you're not supposed to touch anybody in Latihan. And I opened my eyes and it was Bapak, and he was lifting my arms up and down. Yeah, move. And I was so embarrassed that I just closed my eyes. I laughed at first. I just was shocked, and I laughed and closed my eyes and just hoped he would go away because it was just like, embarrassing and just shocking. And so after that, we went back to Portland, of course, and settled into our life again. But the next Latihan that I went to in Portland, the men said, begin. And I just started to run around the room doing cartwheels and dance moves that I couldn't even, I'd never done any dance. I did these martial arts movements and sang to the top of my lungs, Allah, Allah. And I'd never said the word Allah in my life. And whatever it was, Bapak broke loose that that block that I had. I'm very grateful for that moment. And since then, we've been doing Ladihan for a long time. And when we went back to Alaska, which I did, Hilda got pregnant after a while. We got married. Hilda got pregnant. We went back to Alaska with our child. And I asked the local Catholic priest if where I was working, if I could use the church to do Ladihan. And of course, I tried to do Ladihan by myself, but I fell asleep, and I'd wake up an hour later and walk out of the church, basically. But the priest was pretty nice. He did let me use the church. And then Hilda tried to take the book back to the library in Juneau to give it back, the book concerning Subud, and they wouldn't take it back because it wasn't in the card catalog. Somebody had just traveled through Juneau and put it in the library on the shelf. So I once again kind of felt the miraculousness of this journey that we're on, and this strange moment that we got connected with Subud by the grace of God. And so that was kind of the beginning.
Quite a story.
Yeah, it was. It's meaningful, and it's nice to remember it sometimes and say it again, because that's how you kind of remember.
Yeah. So, any other kind of experiences that are kind of unusual that you've had in Subud over the years?
Yeah, I've had some hallmark ones. I've had dreams that have been significant. When I was in Alaska for the last time, we had our daughter up there, and we were living in a trailer in Skagway, Alaska, and I was working on a road, drilling dynamite holes for blasting out a road. And I was kind of an angry young man. I used my anger energy to really accomplish my physical task. And it was a tough job. I was working as a person who helped a driller. And I went up to about 300 foot up this mountain cliff to work on drilling a pinhole where we hooked our cable and then pulled this drill up. These drills were huge. They were like 16,000 pounds, and you get them up on a side hill and then drill a pattern of holes, and the holes would be filled up with dynamite, and you'd blast the road out. Anyway, I was up there on this hill and drilling, and my partner was down about 300 feet below, and he was waving his arms at me, and I'd already hauled this 90-pound jackhammer up there and pulled this cable up there and had my earplugs in, and I was drilling this hole, and I wasn't about to go down there and talk to him again. I mean, it'd taken me half a day just to get everything set up. So I just waved him off and I kept drilling. And pretty soon behind me, I heard this big crack. And I thought, what was that? And I had my earplugs in, so it was really loud. So I looked behind me, and there was an avalanche coming down the mountain, and there was no time to react. It caught me right on the tip of the avalanche and picked me up and took me down the mountain. And then it landed down a cliff about 12 feet, and I hit down at the bottom. And then I thought at that moment, this is where I get covered up. So I put my hands over my head and waited to be covered with the snow. But it didn't cover me up. It just like water, it went behind me and it shoved me out across this road about 60 feet and stopped on the edge of a 500-foot drop. And that was it. And I stood up and my knees started to shake because I realized what had happened. And I looked behind me, and there was a big cloud of dust, smoke dust. You couldn't really see anything. And then when it settled, there was about 6 guys on this ditch line where I first hit, and they were digging with shovels to dig me out. And they hadn't noticed that I didn't get covered. So I said, "What are you guys doing?" And they said, "Hey, there he is." And I marked that as a moment in Subud because for some reason I was allowed to live that day. And I'm very grateful because the richness of my life since then. And my connection with the Ladihan has changed me in ways that are subtle and ways that are deep, that some people recognize and that I recognize, in ways that I don't even recognize. So I'm very grateful to have lived through that moment so that I could meet you and my brothers and sisters in Subud, who I love and really I'm so grateful for.
So what year was that? Do you remember how long were you in Subud when that happened?
I hadn't been in Subud very long, probably about 3 years, two and a half years, maybe.
Hmm.
I went back to that job one more time after that. And then we moved back to Portland and started a more kind of serious Subud life. As we got back to Portland, we'd do lighting on twice a week for a long time. Yeah, just a couple of years. I had that experience with Bapak after that. So there was a lot of evidence that I was into something really fruitful for myself, even though I wasn't moving very much in my lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you had been a regional helper and a national helper at different times. How has that affected your life? Or
well, it's a continuation of a growth that I really believe in for myself and for others that I've experienced. And as an aside, I guess I recommend to anyone who feels moved to be a helper to apply to be a helper and go through the process of candidacy as a helper and work with experienced helpers after you've been in Subud for a while, because each step that I've taken has allowed me to understand in a wider way the Subud community. And also I've received so many gifts of understanding about myself and my own journey. But the tremendous thing for me as a regional helper was the formation of Manuka, the gathering we have in Portland. Because while we gathered the helpers, it was the first time that I really experienced what a helper's day one was. Because we were kind of individual people, Camille Hoffendahl, Intia Libman, Sebastian Tedrow, and myself, with a regional chairperson, Hamilton Chaffetz. We all got together, but we did a retreat at one point to get to know each other. And in that retreat, we really kind of bonded as brothers and sisters. And we accepted, I was just this kind of angry Irish guy. And those guys were just wonderful people. And they accepted me for my passion that I felt about things and my diatribes about the miraculous and all the kind of stuff that I have done all my life. But, I felt accepted, and they all felt accepted, and we just grew to love each other. And in that kind of day one, it made it possible for something like Manuka to happen. And it seems to me that Manuka has been valuable for many people. So I'm really grateful for, just the little part that I played in that, just being one of those elemental things. And not that it was a conscious thing. We just all received the right thing at the right moment, and it happened. It was a grace. It wasn't really an effort. So the regional work was really amazing. And then the national work, I got to travel to Colombia and Cuba and Mexico and Germany and Austria. And those kind of wider experiences of Subud in the world just really give you a sense of the wonderful people who've worked really hard at being, working, in a dedicated way towards Subud, and just swimming in that river of culture that is so deep, and recognizing that the Latihan just connects us in a way that's like brothers and sisters, that you just don't understand this kind of love that you feel for everybody, but you're so grateful for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing, huh?
Yeah, miraculous to the extreme, and it's a kind of miraculous that's so subtle that if you're not, if you're demanding the kind of sensation that we can get in the outer world, it's you can get discouraged if that's the kind of thing you want. If you kind of don't stay attuned to the subtle, I guess. I mean, I just feel lucky. I don't know what I've done to deserve it or to be this lucky, but I'm grateful that I'm luckier than I am smart.
I think probably I am too.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm really grateful for, when my father died, he died a short time before Bapak died. So after those two men were gone from the earth, I realized and felt pretty deeply that I had no one to answer to in a way, and that I needed to embrace myself as the teacher, and become the teacher and the student at the same time. Well, when my father died, I was with him, and he was in a coma, and I had this experience where I felt to tell him, because he told me, and I was raised a Catholic, and there's always this thing that says God is all great, God is all loving, God is omniscient, and all of the alls God is. And so when he was dying in a coma, I whispered in his ear, because I felt he might be afraid, that God is all merciful and all loving. And my dad was kind of a hard man, and he had a problem with alcohol for a while. But the last 10 years of his life, I grew very close to him because he went into recovery, and I realized what a wise man he was. So when he was dying, I wanted to tell him, not to be afraid. So that's what I said to him. And it's kind of the last connection I had with him on the earth. But my sister received a thing where he came to her and said, "You need to talk to Marius because he knows something." And she eventually did get open in the Latihan. And then when I was a national helper, the reason I'm mentioning this because it's one of the moments of my national helper work that was profound for me. We did a helper gathering in Sacramento, and it was kind of one of the first gatherings that the national helpers did in my day one, where helpers were gathered together in California from all over the country. And the regional helpers actually organized it, but we got to attend it as national helpers. And at one point, I just felt so grateful to be there that we were having this kind of pre-Latihan check-in. And there was this big circle of people. And I just felt compelled to touch everybody and to, make connection. So I went around in this big circle and I shook hands with people that I didn't know very well, but was grateful to see and had recognized. And I hugged people that that where we were connected. We got all the way around and I just felt satisfied, but it for me, it connected us all in this really powerful way. And then just shortly after that, we went in to do Latihan. And when I was just beginning the Latihan, I looked over across the room with my eyes closed or open, I don't know. And there was my father standing there, and he was nodding his head in affirmation to this moment. And that's the first time I'd seen him since his death, which was, that was probably 2005 14, and I think he died in 1986. I'm pretty sure he died in 1986. So I was very happy that he was okay.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
And yeah, and so that was a gift in my national helper work. And there was many gifts. I worked with wonderful people in the day one. And in all of the day ones that we worked, it wasn't just all smooth sailing. I mean, we had disagreements, we had moments of tenseness, we had difficult people that, brothers and sisters who were going through purification that was challenging for us to attend to. And sometimes we felt overwhelmed, but at the same time, we just grew very close. And I just loved the people that I worked with, that I just felt very grateful to have met them. And even though we didn't always disagree about or agree about everything, we just accepted that we're all going through our own thing. And I guess in retrospect, in Subud, after this many years, I would say we just all need to recognize that Subud is definitely purification. And we just need to cut each other slack for that purification.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows anybody else's journey.
Yeah.
Just to love each other and not be too judgmental or expect too much. But when we get a lot, then just to be grateful. Anyway, that's just some of the experiences as a national helper.
Yeah. Have you had any particular experiences around Bapak besides the one you mentioned?
That's the most profound one. Although when I read Bapak's talks, I really am convinced that Bapak was a messenger of God. And not everyone feels the same way about it as I do. I even have my suspicions who he was. I mean, there have been a few times when I have been convinced, but I don't know if that's useful to say or to, I wouldn't need to convince anybody else of my own beliefs about it. But there's a small book that was done by, it's called Glimpses of Reality. And I'm trying to think of the helper that put it together. He's in England. I'm thinking it's Duncan Campbell, but I'm not sure that's right. Anyway, it's my favorite little book, and there's these really beautiful little short explanations that Bapak made in the early days about what the Latihan was and what it meant. And one of the things that was profound in this little book for me is the idea that we're getting help from both the inner and the outer, and that the angels are kind of responsible for the outer. So I have had some experiences with angels, and I truly believe in them, that they're around us all the time. We're not always aware of it, but it's one of the things that kind of enhances the profound nature of the miraculous in Subud for me.
So do you have any of those experiences you can talk about with angels or something?
They're pretty simple. There's a particular, I don't know if it's a particular angel, but there is an angel in the Subud house that I've run into in the Subud house in Portland. And this angel, man or woman, I don't know if there's a need to have a gender as an angel, probably not. But occasionally I sit down in the bench and I get pushed aside. And I've had a few instances when I was in such a state of kind of resentment toward a brother in Subud during the Ladigan that, I kind of hoped for a shift in my attitude so I could really receive the Ladigan. And I've had a few instances when I've been touched on my back and this resentment has gone away so that I could get into Ladigan more easily. And I could feel it. I knew I was having that experience, and I knew that there was help responsible for it, not from me, but that I was getting help.
Yeah.
So they're the kind of subtle experiences that, I don't expect anyone else to believe, but they're true for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking back, how do you feel Subud has affected your outer life and your work?
Well, my work, I'm a carpenter. It took me a long time to embrace myself as a carpenter because I was during the period, and there was a historical period in Subud where everyone was testing to find out what their true talent was. You probably remember that.
Yeah.
And I'm a good storyteller. I mean, I love to tell stories. I shouldn't say I'm a good storyteller, but I love to tell stories. I love kind of the dramatic and the flair a little bit. And I aspired to do some acting early in my life. And I love the idea of putting artistic adventures together. So I kind of always had an inkling toward that kind of work, and I love to sing. So once I started a family, those possibilities were no longer available to me because I had to get busy and start making some money. And so I moved, toward the stuff that I knew, which was I'm a good problem solver. I'm good with my hands, and I inherited those abilities. And so I became a carpenter at a certain point. But there was a moment in Montana when I actually embraced myself as a carpenter, and then I became a carpenter. But I kind of struggled with that point up to us, somewhere in my 30s when I just accepted I'm a carpenter, and I moved toward that. So those kind of moments are significant to me because at that point I could see a change in the direction of my life. Even though most of my life I've struggled materially, that struggle has given me so much that I wouldn't have it any other way, because it's taught me about hopefulness. It's taught me about despair. When I've been, when we moved to Montana at a certain point in my life, and I was, I'd been in Subud a while. I had this kind of notion that I would build a community there and have kind of an intentional community and gather people around me. And all those things really happened. The things I desired happened, but it wasn't according to my own will, and it wasn't according to my own plan, thank God, because I probably would have messed it up. But I did get everything that I wanted in connection and community. And we had gatherings up there, and Subud Youth came up there after congresses, and it was really beautiful. But when we first went up there was times we didn't have enough money to buy shampoo and toothpaste. So in those moments, I learned about despair, because I met the right people who had lived in their car and survived. And no matter how desperate it seemed, we always had enough. And my children always had enough. Even though I wanted to give them more, they always had enough. And in the end, they turned out to be these 3 beautiful girls who are so responsible so integrous, and have put their life together in this amazing way that I don't even know how, after just being in the struggle with me, and I guess accepting me for kind of a struggling person. They've really created honorable lives, and I'm really grateful for that. So all those struggles seem to have been fruitful, even though at the time, some of the times it was like I felt lost. So, that movement, at this point in my life, I'm very grateful for it. I wouldn't really have it any other way. But in the moment of struggle, sometimes you lose your faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot in all of our lives. That's just the way it is. This is not paradise, that's for sure.
Right.
But it's sure a good teacher. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the Ladion. I don't know how to be in the world without that connection. I couldn't be, I don't think. Maybe I would have gone over the cliff. Anyway, that's kind of how I feel about it. I'm just rambling, so.
Well, do you remember that experience we had when I came up to Montana?
I do, yeah.
Can you talk about that a bit?
Well, there was a couple moments that were really interesting, and one of them was you tested with me and maybe Sebastian Tedrow when Lucas Kimsey was up there. He wanted to know if he should get married or not. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And we were at Ron Cottonwood's house down by the river, by the Flathead River. And I don't know where, it seemed like we were outside, but we might have tested in a teepee or something. I can't remember. But when we tested it, suddenly there was this huge lightning storm. And as if the answer was yes, and he did get married. He had a brain tumor, so he didn't know if he should get married because he didn't know if there would be a life for him and for anything that his marriage produced. But actually, he lived 8 more years. He had 2 beautiful children. And then he died at a Subud conference, actually in Denver, Colorado, I think. But that was one of the moments that we spent together that was really profound for me. And the fact that he trusted us to test that question for him, that was a huge thing.
Yeah.
That next time that I remember, we were in Ferndale, close to the property that we'd bought, living in kind of this rental behind the local grocery store. And you and I were, I don't know if we were doing Ladion, but suddenly the northern lights came over the Swan Mountains, and it was like being in that movie. I can't think of the name of the movie right. But anyway, they came over the mountain, and it was like this big light show. It was like they were shooting up into the sky. And you and I were standing there watching it.
Yeah.
It was
I remember that.
unforgettable.
Yes. Amazing time.
Yeah, and you were definitely, you came over there to help me, whether you knew it or not, but there you were. And I'm very grateful for that.
Me too. I'm very grateful for our friendship over the years.
I remember in Portland, there would be these gatherings there, and you and Morris Cairns would come, and I felt like you 2 guys were my helpers, my traveling helpers that would come around.
Yes.
Two wise old guys that knew what was up.
Yeah. I remember Morris would show up at my house every once in a while, just like in the middle of the night. He would just show up and we'd have these great conversations.
Yeah, he was a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
When I would come to Lottie Hunt, sometimes I'd come to Lottie Hunt in Portland when he was living in the basement of the Subud house. And he'd be in the kitchen and I'd be early. We'd be early, like I'd come at 7 or something because I was working over there and I didn't want to drive home. And he'd be cooking up his hot dogs and we'd share a hot dog together. It was a sweet moment. He was a really good guy.
Yeah.
I miss him.
Any other things you would want to share about your experiences in Subud?
I guess just currently, I guess I feel like, at the moment, I've felt like Subud is in Portland, at least, is kind of stuck. And I'm hoping that we can break through when we kind of all reemerge from the pandemic and really get together again, that we can kind of break through to a new place. It's my hope. And I hope it's not by my will, but by the grace of God, we'll just be able to get to a wider place, because it's a miraculous experience, but we're not really, there's not people coming to Subud, and the youth seem to be retreating in Portland, at least. We don't have a lot of young people that are interested in being involved in the group. And I think that's I think it's the group's responsibility. I mean, I think there's something that we need to look at to see why that is. And I hope we can get serious about it with humility and without ego, trying to find a new way to invite the world into Subud and to invite the youth who are already open to come and help us. I really, that's my desire. I guess I really believe in, Portland's very active in Susila Dharma and does an amazing job every year in conjunction with Sacramento, raising funds for Susila Dharma. But all these years when we raise this money, I've always felt the desire to ask Portland to, take half of that money and give it to Subud youth, because I think there's so much talent in Subud youth, but they don't get the kind of support that they could get from enterprises and funding efforts that we really get serious about as a social program for Subud, but we kind of ignore the youth in Subud, at least in America, or at least in Portland. I can't speak for the rest of the world. So anyway, that's my hope, that we can move to a new place, and that all of our Ladians will continue to grow, and we keep the faith that no matter how long we've been in Subud, we're still making progress, whether we know it or not. By the grace of God, we're being purified, and for some of us, maybe it's a 50-year program, or maybe as one helper that tested in front of Bapak, and Bapak said, yeah, good, another 40,000 years.
Okay.
I guess that's all.
Well, thank you. Do you have any objections to me putting this up for other people to see?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
I just want to be loved for my foibles and my all the things that are hard for me, hard for people to accept. And I'm willing to accept everyone for their process of purification. And I hope I grow deeper in understanding about humanity, and I understand what further understand what's going on in the world, so I don't get so impassioned about the injustice that I see, so I can be useful and not just enraged.
Yeah. Better to be useful than enraged. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
thank you, Marius. I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you for doing it. I wouldn't have done, I wouldn't have thought about it really. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
I love you, bro.
Love you back.
See you pretty soon, I hope.
Yeah, me too. Bye.
Bye-bye.